All right, everybody. So we have an interesting and somewhat embarrassing episode of the pursuit of ownership in store for you. So Peyton and I had this bright idea that we were going to take a walk through his potential acquisition process, his whole journey as a dental student, getting into a practice. But we wanted to do it anonymously, sort of in the in service of the pursuit of ownership and pre-ownership underwater and such. And we felt that was appropriate because it was like sort of something that was still kind of ongoing. So we said, okay, well, we're just gonna, we're gonna interview Peyton, and he's gonna be anonymous. We're gonna think of a name, and we're just gonna do this as if I'm not talking to Peyton. And then we kind of listened back to the interview and thought, absolutely no way is anyone going to fall for this. Peyton and I have decided to come clean prior to the episode even airing and just tell you that this is an episode of me interviewing Peyton, and we there was just a whole lot of on-screen / off-screen chemistry in the interview, and I think it would just be ridiculous for us to think that you guys wouldn't figure it out. So Peyton, you're complicit in this too. What do you have to say for yourself?
Well, we originally said I was just going to say that I did a mailer, but I believe in the interview I said that I did a magazine, and I don't really know if anyone else has done a magazine for like a practice acquisition. I was trying to be as impartial as possible, but I'm so bad at like pretending like I don't know someone that I feel like the banter was just too good. Like you don't get that kind of chemistry just from a random person, not a random person, but meeting someone for the first time.
Yep, that's true. And we do a fair amount of voice masking whenever we have anonymous people on. But I have the suspicion that even if we did that, your wakeboarding accent would come through. You're just a bro, Peyton, and there's just no amount of voice alteration that's going to take away from that. And I just think your mannerisms are way too recognizable.
They are. It's not even like how my voice sounds. It's just like the cadence and the inflections. And I've actually gotten this feedback from my fiance. She was like, "Yeah, you really can't hide your voice. Like it's just not.
You just sound like a deadpan joke. Like your dry sense of humor comes out when you're not making a joke." And I thought we'd maybe even be so bold as to have you in the intro, and then immediately afterward, people hearing you under a masked voice, and it was just never ever going to work. It was just such a dumb creative idea. I just hope that no one thinks we were being disingenuous at all. We just thought that would be clever, and it wasn't. But anyway, just to kind of talk about the subject of the interview in general, I think this was a really great. We'll discuss this in the outro. We'll get into that. So for everyone else, just enjoy. If you're Star Wars fans, I think you'll have some special moments in this. So buckle up. All right, here we are for another episode of the Pursuit of Ownership. I am flying solo today, and I have on a very special guest. He is a fellow young and ambitious dental student that is looking for an opportunity pretty much immediately after school, which I absolutely love. And we can talk about that for hours on this show. So I'm super excited to have him on, and I'll let him introduce himself a little
bit. So I guess for me, I just really dipped into the podcast world, and that really is kind of what got me started on this whole ownership thing. I kind of felt like going into dental school, ownership would be something that I would really enjoy, but I hadn't really done anything to act on it. So once I found podcasts, I finally was like, okay, this is amazing. I finally have a source of information where I can kind of learn about all this stuff. And it was really just interesting to hear about all the different facets of ownership and what it all entails.
And have you been listening to Share Practices a while, or were you listening to other podcasts, or what were you?
Yeah, so I'm currently a D3.
Okay.
And I started kind of like D2 year. Honestly, I wish I would have found it earlier. Because it's one of those things where as soon as you start listening, you're like, oh my gosh, like where was this when I needed it? Like granted, like I feel like D2 is still kind of early. But I really feel like it's never too early to start learning this kind of thing,
No, it's not. But I do I do like the idea of finding it earlier, because D2 can be kind of a whirlwind for people. And it's tough when you have your mind subsumed in so many other things for you to kind of spare the time to do some podcasting and stuff. And, personally, I found podcasts because I was working in a dental lab, and I was able to get my work done in half time and then just look busy for the other half of the time. And I figured that if I ever caught stealing work time, I might as well get caught listening to dental podcasts and stuff. So that's pretty much how it happened for me. And I found it during a time where I actually had sufficient free time to really dive deep and take tons of notes. So I was really fortunate in that. And so, I think that anytime you find it is the right time. But starting in D2, I mean, that's still you're way ahead of the game. So I congratulate you on that.
Thank you. Yeah, it was actually really nice too because the way our school is structured, they second year is I would say one of your more relaxed years. Uh, D1 they just throw everything they possibly can at you. I feel like any class they could think of, they're just like here's this class.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but D2 you have some sim lab classes, some hands on stuff, and you have some sitting in class lectures, but it's not too much to handle. So it was kind of nice that I did stumble upon podcasts at a time when I, actually had some free time to consume them.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we move on, I just realized I did not ask you what your anonymous guest name is today.
Oh, geez. Okay. I feel like I'm gonna have to go with like Frank. Have we had a Frank?
We're not doing Frank. Sorry.
What?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how familiar you are with the show. Frank would be a great name for Practice Underwater. That's Matt and George's side of things. They're both stiffs themselves, or at least stiff people, and they don't mind names like that, but I do. It's going to have to be a little bit more memorable than that. I can suggest one if you like.
I mean, I was pretty set on Frank, but I mean, if you want to
Yeah.
suggest one, I'm not opposed.
Yeah, again, that's not going to happen. So, in the spirit of my recent text tone, let's see if I can find it in due time. Here we go. Hold on. I don't know if you're familiar with The Mandalorian, but that's what your name is going to be today. I am a huge Star Wars fan, for all those that don't know. And I've been keeping up with The Mandalorian for the past few months. And now my text tone and my ringtone are Mandalorian themed. And I might play my song at the end of the episode, actually. So, yeah, I hope you're okay with that.
I'm sure.
Not a fan, I guess. Okay.
I
All
can't
right.
say that I'm super huge into Star Wars, but
Okay.
for the purposes of the show, I mean, by all means,
Okay.
Mandalorian it is.
Well, do you have Disney Plus?
No, I wish I liked movies, which sounds terrible. I feel like that sounds sad. It makes my life sound sad, but
Well, perhaps your life is just so exciting that you don't have time for movies. So I congratulate you on that.
let's go with that. That sounds good.
Okay, so to get back to who you are and what you're all about, I mean, obviously, you're a dental student that stumbled onto the venture of practice ownership, and you kind of caught that bug. And I think we all know that once you get really into this whole journey, it's hard to unsee it. So, how exactly did you arrive at the idea that you wanted to own a practice out of school? When you reached out to me, that's what you initially said, is like that's what you wanted to do. How did you come to that conclusion? Why did that sound like such a good idea for you?
Oh man, this is tough. I feel like listening to all the podcasts that I have has kind of ruined my brain a little bit. Just like realizing what's possible. And I feel like you hear a lot of people say maybe buying a practice right out of school isn't the best idea. But I feel like for some people, when you hear that, it kind of makes you want to do it a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. I understand
Uh,
that.
so that's kind of
Yeah.
where I'm at right now,
Okay.
which it's like frustrating and exciting at the same time. Um, just being so, just having that angst, it's tough to shake.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you're listening to a lot of podcasts, you're going to stumble onto the voices of people who, likely represent a smaller subset of the dental population, either, be they dental students or dentists or what have you. And I guess as listeners, as avid listeners, we want to sort of transpose ourselves onto these people and sort of adjust our expectations of what we can do based off of that. And it's just such a different norm to be going off of than that of people that you're likely surrounded with. by at a dental school, by your faculty, by your professors, by just general precedent of how people's careers generally proceed. And you get this idea that you could be owning a practice right out of school, and it's almost like such a taboo thing to say. But at the same time, I'm not trying to discourage that sort of ambition. So I applaud you on it, and I wish you the best in that journey. So in light of that, I'm curious as to how you've gone about it, what you've been looking for. How did you develop your vision? What do you have?
Yeah, yeah. So I guess we can kind of start with where my vision is at currently. I feel like it pretty much changes on a weekly basis, which probably isn't good. But right now, and kind of as of late, I really liked everything that kind of the group practice, multiple docs in a single location has to offer. Uh, for me personally, I really like the idea of someone knowing that if they come to this dental office, whatever they are going to need can be taken care of there. And so that's what my ultimate kind of end goal would be. I feel
Mhm.
like,
So full service then is what you're saying.
yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
like multiple docs, specialists, whether they're there full time or maybe they're coming in part time, once a week, whatever that might look like. But yeah, that's really where I'd like to end up long term. I just think it's really cool to be able to build that one location that serves everyone. So that's going to be where I'd like to end up long term. I know buying a practice that's that size probably is not feasible for a young dentist, especially one that's coming right out of school. So,
Well, I got to ask. I mean, how have you? I mean, I like your idea for starters. How have you sort of equated that to this needs to be a larger practice? Is there an idea that in order to service all of this, you need to have several providers in order to suit that need of everything under one roof? I mean, how much of this do you plan to be on doing yourself? I guess is what I'm really asking.
uh, I don't foresee myself being super clinically involved long term. Obviously, for I'd say at least 3 to 5 years out of school. And personally for me, I if there was a specialty that I would want to do, it would probably be ortho.
Really?
But
Okay.
the the ownership bug is killing me. I just don't think I can prolong it any longer. Uh,
Do you like
and
regular dentistry though?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
and that's the thing
That's good.
too. Like, I don't know if I could only do ortho all the time.
Mhm.
Like, I think having the option, and maybe when I'm, a little bit further along in my career, if I had a bigger office, I could kind of maybe come in once or twice a week, do some ortho cases, and call that good for my um, clinical experience in the office. But
Okay.
yeah, as far as you were saying with the, having to be a bigger location, I guess you could do it to where you just had GPs that were very advanced. They kind of knew how to do a lot of things. Um, but I don't know. For some reason, when I started working on this vision in my head, it always looked like a bigger practice. It looked like there being, 3 to 4 docs there at the same time,
Mhm.
having a really big, um, hygiene pool. I don't know. It just something about having like a big office that kind of makes a statement and is able to help a lot of people really stuck out to me.
So when we're talking about being full service and having everything under one roof, is this also intended to be a family practice, treating kids as well, or do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't see why not.
Okay.
Bring in a pediatric dentist. That sounds like something I'd love to do. Or like you were saying, if you have a couple GPs that like seeing kids, then by all means, that's definitely not something that I'd be opposed to.
Right. So like one thing that I don't know a whole lot about is, it's been my deduction that when GPs are doing ortho, a majority of them are doing majority ortho on adults.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's universally true, but it seems to be a trend. I definitely know examples of those that are doing ortho and actually doing them on a lot of kids too. Like Paul Etchison, I think comes to mind, does a decent amount of kids. I believe I could be totally wrong on that, but I think he has a
Hmm.
decent amount of volume. And generally, when people do, they're servicing children. Um, so yeah, I mean, if that's a part of your vision there, do you see yourself doing ortho on children as well and trying to have that sort of pedo ortho pipeline going on in the practice, or is it you would have an orthodontist in there and they be taking care of that aspect of things? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. That's a really good question. So I would love to, learn about all the different types. The only issue that I'm running into now, and this can be fixed with CE, down the road, and even
Mhm.
maybe during my fourth year of school, but they really don't expose us to a whole lot of ortho in school. Like we don't get any hands-on ortho experience with patients at all. They really won't let us do anything of that nature. So we have our labs of bending wires and that kind of thing, but it kind of sucks because that's like the one, though
Is-
not the one
yeah.
thing, but that's the one of the specialties that I really find interesting.
Is there an ortho program at your school?
Yes.
Yeah, I honestly I feel that, and this is purely suspicion here, but I feel that especially in schools where you have an ortho program, the whole bending wires thing is just to really weed out like who really wants to do ortho, and for everyone else to make them never think they want to do ortho ever. I think that's what that whole practice is about, because otherwise why would we do it? Why would we be getting calluses in a day like trying to bend ortho wires unless we had some sort of inkling in our mind, hey, I don't have to like be an orthodontist. I can just take some CE and do this. I really I'm not totally sure, but I believe that is the profession being protective. And I gotta say touche, because man, that was a tough day. That
Yeah,
was a
I
really tough time.
I didn't know your hands could hurt so much in such a short amount of time.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Well,
I have never thought about it like that. But honestly, I could see it because
yeah,
it's so funny.
that's
Like,
sort of like a tinfoil hat thought of mine, but yeah,
yeah,
I'm pretty confident about
because
it.
they have I know for us, like they have the sim lab class where you're bending the wires, and they have residents come in, and any resident that hadn't gone to our school had like this was like their first time bending a wire also. So I was like, what? Like clearly this isn't a universal like all schools do the wire bending thing. And when I asked them about it, they're like, "Oh, you keep overhead low," and I'm like, "Could you please point me to an orthodontist that bends wires? Like, I would love to
I've
see
never
that."
seen that. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, I kind of feel like it might be being protective of the specialty, but I don't know. We'll
That's
cross
a
that bridge
total
when the time
tangent.
comes.
I
Yeah.
apologize for that. I just had to put that on the airwaves. But okay, so to sort of to recap from where I diverted this whole conversation. So um, we're wanting everything in house. We like ortho. We like seeing kids. We are thinking about having a pediatric dentist in there. So this is going to be a practice where yeah, I agree it has to be larger. Right. If that's the idea, is that we have to have specialists in there, then it certainly has to be larger. Do you have an idea of how many ops would service that?
And that's the tough part because in my head, I'm thinking big, like 15 to 20 long term.
Hmm.
Obviously, that's not a feasible first option, at
It
least
is not.
to my knowledge, it's not.
If it is, please, we need to find that person out there doing that, starting their first practice 15, 20 ops.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, not a kind of a fat chance there. But
But yeah, so for me, and I don't know if I'm jumping the gun here, but I did do kind of a mailer campaign, and my search criteria was I'd really like to see at least like bare minimum was 6, um,
okay.
ideally 8. I just wanted 2 dentists to be in there comfortably at the same time, or at least have that be a possibility in the near future, because I feel like that really sets the stage for growth
Mhm.
without having to move too far.
Yeah, it's interesting, man, though, because I think with what you're looking at, you're gonna have to move or expand no matter what. Like if you're trying to build this, unless you're, it's like you're either gearing up to do a de novo, you're either moving the office into something bigger. I don't know where you're gonna find it, right? Or
Hope there's a failing Pizza Hut next to me.
precisely that you're expanding on the real estate that you're buying into.
I've
Exactly.
thought of this. Yeah, definitely.
Exactly. Yeah. So, it almost doesn't matter as much. If you find something where there is that sort of adjacent space that could be expanded into in like a predictable timeline, then sure. Okay. Like let's look for something bigger, because we're like actually trying to have same site growth here and grow into that. Otherwise, I'm not, I I almost feel like it's an equity play. Like you just kind of get in there and, grow a practice, but knowing that you're just gonna have to move it anyway. So it's almost like you just want to look for some good demographics and build out some charts or, something, you know what I mean? Like, because whatever it is, it's an intermediary step to this vision that you have. And in a way, you're just trying to create some equity and build something that you can later leverage into what you're trying to do. So I don't know whether it makes sense to be super, super selective about like how many ops you're getting out of it right off the bat. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
But I
And
think you're on the right track. I'm not disagreeing with you at all. I'm just qualifying the statement because I think the 15 to 20 thing is just it's a huge play.
mhm. Yeah, and with something it just like doesn't sit right with me to like hope on the business next to me failing. Like I would rather not. Like that just doesn't. Something about it just not doesn't feel good.
Dog eat dog. Sharks in
Yeah,
water. No, I understand.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you did your mailer. Did you have any particular strategy about that? And when did you send it out? You're a
So
D3 now.
let's see. So I sent it out kind of middle of my fall semester for D3.
Middle of fall semester D3. Okay.
So it's kind
That's
of
right.
around
Yep.
end of the year now. So it's been I don't know, a good 3 months or so.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was the response rate like? And what was kind of your messaging in that too? Because, I feel like with this vision that you have, I mean, were you sort of like really clear with people about what you were trying to do with it and exactly what you were looking for? Or what was your pitch?
Yeah. Yeah. So I actually spent a long time thinking about this because, in my opinion, I kind of feel like there's like two ways you can go about a mailer. And I kind of gathered these from different resources on the shared practices page. But you can kind of go at it in the way of saying, hey, I want to buy your practice, like the much more direct way. Or you can kind of say, hey, I'd just like to connect with dentists in the area. And I felt like I was kind of in the middle. I brought up the idea, obviously, of selling the practice and buying it, but I didn't like make that the sole focus of the magazine because
Yeah.
I just didn't want to turn anyone away. I want to just keep those doors open and ultimately just connect with as many people as possible.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Fair enough. So, I mean, I think, you have to be careful. As a student, anyway. I mean, if you're a D3 versus a D4, does it really make it that much of a difference, Dennis? I'm not sure. But I think the timeline does. I mean, if you're not talking about buying it out for another, 2 years, your messaging may need to be a little more softer. I'm trying to buy your practice in, May of 2023 or whatever, right? That can be a little off-putting and just like too far off for people to really take it too seriously. It's just too easy to table that and just be like, oh, I'll think about it a little bit closer to the time, right? And so I think that starting with a relationship based thing and just letting people know who you are and what you're looking for and sort of let them fill in the blanks there is a good approach. I agree with it. And especially when I assume maybe you're planning on like we kind of advocated a 2-round mailer, maybe sending out another one in
Yeah.
the somewhat near future. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. No, I agree with it. Okay. Okay. So what kind of stuff were you getting back?
Yeah. So, first thing that I found was really interesting was all the responses were emails, which I found kind of surprising because I feel like talking to and hearing from other dentists that have done this in the past, it seems like normally they're phone calls. At least that was my perception of it. But yeah, they were all emails. I
Mhm.
believe I had, I want to say 6 overall responses. 2 were maybes / interested, and then 4 were no's, but they weren't like mean no's. They were just like, this is really cool. I like what you're doing. Sadly, we don't have anything for you at this time. And a couple of them actually were like, might be looking for an associate then. Like, definitely keep us in mind when you graduate. So,
Okay.
yeah, there are a variety of responses for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
I am so proud that we still have Q Optics as a sponsor for the Shared Practices podcast. It's been almost 2 years and I'm still using my 4.5x Prism loupes. They're custom through the lens, they're beautiful, people like them, I get compliments on them, but more than anything, I love the magnification. Some people are hesitant to jump up from 2.5 to 3.5, maybe to 4 or even 4.5. I have never met someone who said, you know what, I really wish I could see less when I'm doing dentistry. I really just like, if there's decay still there, I don't want to know. I just want to close this tooth up. You should want to see as much as possible. It's going to make your preps better. It's going to make your life better. You're going to see more. You're going to catch more. The only person I can give a pass to, we had someone buy some loops and share them on our Facebook page. And I was like, oh no, why didn't you get the prisms? Why didn't you get the 3.5, 4.5? He's like, well, I'm a pediatric dentist. I was like, fine. Okay, you get a pass. You can buy normal Q Optics loops. Everyone else, you should be buying 3.5 plus. You're not going to regret it. So if you're finally ready to upgrade, email sales@qoptics.com and use the promo code SP19, as in Shared Practices SP19, for a discount off your loops and light combo.
Well, cool. So I'm guessing that one of those was something that you could kind of follow through with, and was important enough for you to want to come on the show, right? So, kind of tell me a little bit about who this seller was and what they were looking for.
Yeah. So I guess like what do you want to know? Do you want to know space? Do you want to know what details do you want?
Well, I guess I'm sort of curious about, the sort of doctor that answers back to a D3 that's saying,
Mhm.
hey, I want to buy a practice.
Yeah.
What's their sort of timeline? What are they looking for in selling their practice, and why are they not selling it to someone else?
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you know that.
Yeah. So that was actually the one that I did end up following through with for a good amount of time was doctor, 65 years old. He'd been in the area for a long time, and he honestly was super excited that someone like myself had reached out. And the reason specifically why I said this was that he had been talking with some corporate groups, and he had, some decent offers on the table, but he just, something about it didn't sit right with him. And that's kind of when I knew that if I did decide to follow through with this, that it probably would work, just because he wanted his office to stay private. He didn't want it going to some big group. He wanted to make sure his patients were being taken care of. So
Yeah.
he said that pretty early on when I was talking to him. So that kind of gave me a degree of comfort, just knowing that I wasn't walking on eggshells. Like he kind of wanted it to work, if that makes sense.
And to skip ahead just slightly, you don't have to get specific. Does he have sort of a larger, more successful practice? Like, is this kind of higher production or?
Yes, and that's another piece too. So it was 9 ops. It was producing
Yeah.
just a little shy of 2 million.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was definitely a bigger office doing, the kind of numbers that I would like to see moving forward.
Yeah. The point, and the reason I asked that, and we'll talk a little bit more about the specifics of the practice later, but, for a seller that's, 65, definitely coming up on retirement age, that has a successful practice that is most likely making it a decent amount of take home income. And getting to the point where, there's no question that they're getting plenty of DSO offers. And you mentioned the seller was already, what kind of person is saying no to those kinds of offers? I mean, those offers can be really, really impressive. DSOs have gotten very creative with how they approach people about this kind of stuff. I mean, sometimes, it's just cash in hand. I mean, they're just paying for these practices right out. Sometimes, they have docs stay on for a time, and the docs are able to kind of come in there and be clinical. And sometimes they retain equity. There's just a lot of ways to structure it, and they get, huge multiples sometimes are being offered for their practices, their EBITDA times 10, 12, 15, whatever. I mean, just crazy numbers you'll see. And oftentimes that's more with like larger groups of practices. But even with single site, doing 2 million like this, I mean, I'm sure he got some pretty attractive stuff. Sometimes they can stay on as like have like a minority position in it and still have some equity in the practice. I mean, it's just really impressive, how they've grown to incentivize older docs that have sort of taken their dream as far as they're willing to take it. And then they'll they'll take it, they'll, inject some cash. The person can, pay off their debts and do all kinds of things. And then they sort of like still retain some equity, and then the equity grows as the group grows and stuff. I mean, it's just, they throw so much stuff at these people, and still they say no to these things, and they're willing to entertain the option of a dental student buying out their practice. Like that's crazy. And it's very counterintuitive. You don't think these people exist until you're out there and you're looking for them. You're sending them mailers and you're showing them who you are and that you're different and that you're willing to go for it. And those types of people are the ones you're going to find. That's the ones that, make it through every sieve that's in place. So,
Actually, I have something you said kind of reminded me too.
Mhm.
Another thing that he said was with a lot of those offers from big companies, they have you stay on, and
Exactly. That's becoming more common. Yeah.
and he didn't want that.
Mhm.
So that was
Okay.
another thing that kind of helped make me look like a more attractive, option.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, that was just another thing that he, didn't sit right with him as far as
Yeah,
DSOs
I
go.
think I think too that's more common with people who are is he sort of clinically diverse?
Yeah, he is.
I think that's common too because it's harder for a group to buy them out and then just immediately reproduce that production with some associate that they can stick in there. A lot of times it's nice to have them have some skin in the game and just kind of stick around, keep the production stable while they have their sort of like incremental cost savings and other production boosts and stuff that they like to talk about and do whenever they acquire practices. And then over time there's like that sort of phase out timeline stuff, and so it confers the seller some additional income, the ability to sort of just scale back clinically but still treat their patients and have there be a smoother transition. But it's interesting that he didn't want to stay on. So is he looking to just sell out and not stay on clinically for a time? Is that a thing?
So that's another thing that was interesting. So like I said, I think he just didn't want complete lack of control with the transition, and I feel like that's kind of what he was expecting from a DSO.
Okay.
Because when I did meet with him, he very friendly, very transparent about everything, and he said that he'd be willing to stay as long as I needed him. And
Wow.
honestly, I was really surprised because he said he'd still be willing to be there, multiple days a week. And he kind of said like, "Hey, if you need me here, great. If not, like, just let me know."
Wow.
I feel like lots of times, and this is obviously going off what I've heard because I don't have that much experience with this stuff, but lots of times the doc will request or like require that they stay on for a certain amount of time. But that's not at all what I saw with this situation, which was honestly very refreshing. I thought it was nice that flexibility was built in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And for him to not be willing to do that for a DSO, but to be willing to do it for you really says something. Yeah, and there's just so much to be said for, private practices trying to preserve private practice and looking out for prospective young dentists like yourself. So yeah, props to this guy. I really like this guy.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I loved him too. Yeah, he's very, very friendly, very nice.
Okay, cool. So, yeah, at this point, I mean, I think we can, kind of get into the brass tacks. Matt makes fun of me all the time for using that term, and I'm trying to use it less, but it just seems so appropriate. But
Yeah,
um,
what are you trying to say?
nothing. So yeah, brass tacks of the practice. So, you said it was 9 ops. I think you said it was doing around 2 million.
Yeah, so just a little shy of 2 million.
Okay.
One doctor, which that right away kind of scared me a little bit. I'm not gonna
Yeah. And how many hygienists?
lie. So as far as his team goes, there was 2 hygienists, 2
Okay.
assistants, and then 4 front desk.
And how many days?
I want to say it was 4 days.
Okay, so
4
8
days,
hygiene
like
days.
full-time schedule. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
so like 8 to 4, 8 to 5, I think.
Okay, so I'm already kind of getting a portrait here. So we have a $2 million practice. There's one doc in it. We've got 8 hygiene days, and you already said this guy's pretty clinically diverse. So
Mhm.
it sounds like we've got sort of a super producing type person. Am I getting the
Yeah,
right vision there? Okay.
yeah, which I feel like is pretty much the opposite of a fresh dental student.
Perhaps we may be teasing, kind of my thoughts on the might be showing my hand a little early there, but hey, let's give it some time. So, what's he doing in the practice? What's the procedure mix like?
Yeah, so pretty much all things. He does implants,
Mm-hmm.
he does ortho,
Mm-hmm.
and he really, really likes ortho actually, which that was something that I found very interesting and kind of caught my attention. So
Mm-hmm.
he does clear liners, he does brackets and wires. So I kind of saw a good mentorship opportunity there.
Of course.
Does root canals on pretty much anything unless you can't see the canal. So he'll do molars. He'll do, tough stuff there. Is there anything that I'm missing?
Yeah, I think he covered most of the bases. Is he a periodontist as well?
Oh, so that's the only thing he
head
doesn't
neck
do.
resection in there.
He said he doesn't do invasive perio surgery. So I feel like that leaves the door open to me, and he still does some. So yeah, he pretty much does everything.
Yeah, I'm guessing that's just like simple soft tissue manipulation, like gingivectomies and maybe some soft tissue augmentation for implants and stuff like that. But
yeah,
nothing like, ostectomies and stuff. Okay, cool. All right. So, well, let me ask this. So how long did he say he was willing to stay on for?
He actually didn't. He didn't put a hard stop on it. Yeah, he kind of was like, whatever you need, I'll be there.
Okay, so I like to gather your thoughts before I give any of mine. So, what was your general impression of this opportunity and how it fit within the framework of your vision?
So, for me, the size of the office is a definite plus. I mean, I haven't seen any other 9-op offices for sale by a broker, or I mean, that sounds like a good amount of space.
What was the square footage and was the real estate up for grab?
Real estate is not up for grabs. Oh man, we haven't even talked about real estate yet. It's a very funky setup. So it's 4,000 square feet total, but it's actually split up into two buildings that are probably maybe 10 feet apart from each other. It's in like a small medical complex, but it's right next to a busy road. Signage is decent.
Is it visible from the road?
So
it's in a medical complex?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So okay, but it has a sign and like you can tell it's a dental practice from the road.
It's a interesting setup for sure. But yeah, so yeah, it's 4,000 square feet split between the two buildings, and the two buildings is actually why there's so many front desks. I don't know if you caught that when I said it earlier, but he has 4 front desks, which I feel like it's.
You said 4?
I said 4.
I wasn't even paying it. I don't think I was even paying attention. 4 front desks. So there's 2. Are there 2 desks?
Yeah, because they're there are 2 different practices that were merged.
Okay. But they weren't really merged, were they? They're like Siamese twins. They're just next to each other.
Yes. Oh, well, one has 4 ops and one has 5, but yeah, basically.
Oh my god. Yeah. That's awful. So do people get scheduled with one of them as opposed to the other, or do they just come to the one practice and maybe they go left or right? Or
I never really got that far. I felt like I was getting pretty in the weeds at that point. I feel like that's something I could have figured out later. But yeah, interesting for sure. Like I didn't know if patients knew, like, is there a central front desk or auxiliary front desk? I really wasn't sure what that looked like.
Okay.
But yeah, so I kind of forgot what question you asked me, to be completely honest.
We kind of, I mean, we were going over what your general impression of the opportunity was, and then we got down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So should I continue with the?
Yeah, please do. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah. So I really like the space. Honestly, there wasn't a whole lot. Like the space was the big pull. The size, like as far as production goes, is great, but it's pretty scary that that's like one doc doing that, especially being a new grad. I know he's willing to stay on, but I feel like at any point in your career, if you're one doctor doing, upwards of 1.5, 2 million, like you're doing pretty well. Like you're moving at a quick pace. You're efficient. Your staff knows what they're doing. So that definitely was something that kind of scared me a little bit. Also, it's in a very developed part of town, so I feel like there's not like a whole lot of growth going on around the area, and I don't know, something about just with the vision that I want and where I see my practice vision going long term. I feel like I kind of need to be in an area that's growing. So I don't know. That's kind of why I'm here, just to try to sort all my thoughts out and see, what the best course of action would be,
Right. So, I mean, One more quick fact. What's the new patient flow like?
So I think it's like 15, maybe 15, 20.
And marketing budget?
No marketing budget.
No marketing.
Yeah.
No marketing, street visible, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, yeah, I mean, the general question really is, if point B is this multi-specialty, everything under one roof practice that we need to have, and we want, at least 15 ops to service that, how does this point A, what is the path from point A to point B look like if point A is this practice, right? That's really what this all comes down to. Um, one thing about the practice space usage here. I mean, you said there's 9 ops between the two spaces. I'll call them, at totaling up to 4,000 square feet.
Mm-hmm.
So there's kind of a lot of wasted space there. I kind of like to see what the floor plan looks like. I mean, generally, just as a roundabout number, 300 square feet per op is, a decently planned out practice. And, for this, I mean, you could easily put 9 ops in about 2,800 square feet in most spaces. I don't know how, I mean, it sounds like they have 2 waiting rooms, so I can understand how there's a little fat to be trimmed there. But within 4,000 square feet, it would seem that you could get more ops in there, maybe not as many as you need. But it could be a play for growing this practice to a decent size, and then maybe eventually you'd have to grow or de novo, or you find a leaner way to accomplish what it is you're looking to do. Maybe you have capable general dentists within your practice as opposed to specialists, which would certainly be an easier overhead play. But I think in terms, like, we can look far out ahead and see maybe how this practice could grow into that. But in the more immediate future for you, there's some obstacles here that are kind of glaring, right? So, first of all, it's a 1 doc practice. It doesn't matter if it has 9 ops. There's only 2 hygienists in there. There's 1 doc, and this guy is doing almost everything that comes through the door. He almost already has that everything under one roof thing going on, just on his own. And as great of a mentorship opportunity that I think this is, and it is whether you like this opportunity or not, I would definitely try to pursue that. The biggest problem is going to be reproducibility here, and trying to come in there as a new doc and servicing a note that is going to be, what was it?
Yeah. So I think the sale price he brought up was 1.5 million.
1.5. Okay. Yeah, that's going to be tough. I mean, the servicing that note with this sort of procedure mix, and not knowing how long this guy's really trying to stay on. There is a play where you could kind of come in here and he's sort of your clinical mentor and just sort of a buffer against lost production that you'll certainly have. At least as far as, you reproducing his production is concerned. But at the same time, there's a lag time here because he's only getting about 15 new patients per month. It's not really enough to service 2 docs in the first place. So there's just not enough meat on the bone there for you two to be in there full service and just taking in all the patients and learning at the same time. And there's going to be the stress of debt. Like, there's just a lot of things you have to deal with here. And I don't think necessarily that it's just out of the realm of possibility. But there's just some really obvious things that make it maybe tougher than you really need to deal with. How does any of that resonate with you?
Yeah, and that's the thing. The thing that's been keeping me is the size. And there's a lot of other things, like you've been saying, that are making me hesitate and think that maybe it's not the best option. At the end of the day, I kind of feel like what's happening is I'm just buying his production. I'm assuming with the extra staff that he has, and he did bring up that they've been around for a long time. I'm assuming they're probably paid pretty well. And if I had to guess, I'd say that he probably, from maybe a profitability standpoint, isn't doing amazing, given the amount of work that he's doing. I feel like if you were to stick someone that does his level of production in just an associateship somewhere, I feel like he'd probably be making a lot of money and obviously not have to deal with the, stresses of being an owner as well. So I just, I just don't know if that's a good starting point for
Yeah.
me fresh out of school,
Yeah, I think you'd be working really, really hard to put money in other people's pockets.
hmm
You know,
Yeah, you'd have the big note, you'd
yeah,
have the seller, or you'd have all the staff and just all the fixed costs that come along with it. Uh,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think you'd be buying into you'd be buying into so much debt and having a really hard time expanding that equity that you'd be
mhm.
buying into, or even stepping into it in the first place. And I just think that's a really, really difficult first step. While I think this opportunity, in some ways, can more closely approximate your final vision than a lot of other offices could, in that it is larger. Um, it not having more than two hygienists and there being one super doc in there, it's like this practice has its ways of imitating something that would be right for you. But when we really look at it for what it is, it's just bloated in ways that are not really going to help you a whole lot, in my opinion.
I feel like this practice is like the perfect, just like tease.
It is.
It's
It's a red
yeah,
herring.
it
It's a
like
red herring.
looks on the surface, it like sounds amazing.
Yeah.
And the more I kind of felt like the more I started learning and the more I started digging into it, it's like, oh man, like that seems like a negative, but is it
Yeah.
enough to say no? That's
Yeah.
that's kind of through the process of just getting more information on it. That's kind of what I've been going through in my head.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is all assuming that you'd even be able to finance this practice in the first place. Did you think about how you'd be able to finance a $1.5 million practice in the first place?
Yeah. So, I mean, he said he'd be willing to seller finance, which is great.
Oh,
Because
okay.
I am very sure that a bank would not loan you $1.5 million right out of school. That's
Fair assumption.
I do not have to wonder about that because I just know. Um, but yeah, so that and another thing is, if I wanted to do it, it I could make it happen, and he like would want to make it happen too. Um, but yeah, like I was saying, it's just there's a lot of things working against me, and if I were to move, I don't know where I would move, just because it's so developed. It's just such a developed part of town that, I mean, granted, maybe with you know COVID, like maybe some businesses closed down, there might be some open retail space, but it seems very stable and very secure around that area. So
Yeah.
I feel like that would make moving tough.
Yeah, that's for sure. And another thing I kind of wanted to bring up, and I actually forgot to ask you, how flexible are you? You said moving, and it made me think about it. How flexible are you in terms of location that you're looking for, like your search radius?
So um, I'm pretty. I'm not super flexible. Like I want to stay within the city I'm in, but the city I'm in is pretty big. So like
Okay.
multi-million people,
Mm,
multi-million, level of population. So it's a pretty big search radius, but there's obviously a ton of dentists around too. So competition is definitely there. And that's not something I'm scared about. I mean, obviously it makes things a little bit more difficult, but I feel like I'd be able to compete if I was put in, an area with some other dentists that were, you know, um, doing well for themselves.
okay. So I think you have at least two things working in your favor here. One of them being temporal. You're a D3, and you have another mailer that you're likely going to be sending out. And there's just time. I mean, there's just time for things to change, for people to have different ideas about when they want to retire, and for circumstances to come along in the lives of potential sellers in your area. You have on market plays as well. I mean, when you go into the semester before graduation, all of a sudden brokers may be willing to have conversations with you. Um, and again, you just have time. You have time to network. You have time to look for more opportunities. And the second thing you have working for you is you have some flexibility in terms of where you're willing to go, or rather, the place that you're looking sounds like it might be pretty ripe with opportunity, especially if you wait, a year or so. And so, the bird in the hand, two in the bush type of conversation, where you like have an opportunity right in front of you, but you might be waiting for a better one in the future. I kind of like the two birds in the bush here, just because again, you have time, you have some flexibility, and if nothing else, I think that you've got a friend out of this. I mean, you've got someone that sounds like they're willing to invest in you, and maybe that means selling their practice to you. Maybe it just means being a mentor. This person sounds like someone that would be willing to be a mentor to you in the first place. Just for the sake of it, that cares about passing on legacy. And maybe that means you take over theirs. Maybe it means you just go do something else. So that's definitely something that I would push no matter what you do. So yeah, I mean, in terms of a lot of times, whether or not we go with these opportunities, despite what our negotiables are, despite what the practice looks like, at the end of the day, we're always looking at the alternative of well, what happens if I don't do anything right now? What happens if I say no? What else might be lying in the wait? And I think here, I mean, there's just tons of opportunity that could be right around the corner for you. And for you to kind of feel like you're being shoehorned in this situation is totally unnecessary. So yeah, I personally, I would encourage you here to be looking for more opportunities, to look for something that makes more sense for your situation. You could entertain alternative paths after graduation as well, if that's what you wanted to do. If you decided maybe going into this right out of school wasn't what's best for you. But again, you just have time to think this stuff over. You have time to look for more stuff. And as opportunist as we all want to be, it's still, a lot of times, how we go throughout our careers has to do with when we, knowing when to say no to things. That's just kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that makes sense to me too. Like I said, there are a couple things that were make me want to hold on to this, but there's also a lot of things that were steering me the other way. And to kind of give some backstory, I feel like I was close to wanting to put it down, but I just wanted to make sure that it was a good decision, and I wasn't just being overly emotional about certain aspects of it. So I think it's kind of refreshing to hear that you are on a similar page that I am.
Yeah,
because I mean, I've done, tried to listen to a lot of podcasts, read a lot of books, just kind of try to study up on this kind of thing. But it's just so much different when it's your situation,
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I've been running into these last couple months.
Yeah. And what's perhaps ironic about it is that you found someone that is the perfect avatar for a seller that a student is looking for, right? You found someone that is willing to forego the opportunities that are coming from them, coming from DSO, valuations and everything, and people saying, "Hey, I want your practice. Hey, I want your practice." And then, this person's turning around saying, "No, I want to reinvest. I want to pay it forward for another, young upstart private dentist, and I'm willing to seller finance, and I'm willing to stay on after the acquisition." And this seller just sounds like a very stand-up person, and it's just what you want. And they responded to your mailer. Like, these people exist, and sometimes it's hard for us to like actually imagine that, but they do. And this was your first mailer, and you found someone like that. So it's encouraging to know that people like that are out there. They may not always have the best opportunities in the world attached to them. But I think it's very easy to get romanticized by them when you find them, because you're just convinced that they're just like these diamonds in the rough. But I think you're going to find another one, even if the seller's not quite as, malleable and gregarious as this one sounds to be. I think you're going to be able to find better opportunities for your vision. And at the end of the day, that's what's most important, because, after the transaction's done, the seller becomes a lot less consequential, unless of course they're staying on for a longer period. But the practice is what you're left with, and that's going to be your baby for, the foreseeable future. So, ultimately it's about getting the right opportunity and getting the one that makes the most sense from point A to point B. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, thank you for all your feedback. I brought a lot of words and just kind of threw stuff on the wall to see what sticks. So I appreciate you kind of helping me make some sense of it.
No, of course. And I have to congratulate you, for, going through this whole process, and commend you for being objective about it, because, it's hard when you find something like this. It's easy. Like it's easy for me to tell a person, no, you shouldn't go with this. Um, but I know from firsthand experience that sometimes you find an opportunity and it's like something you found and like you're proud of it and you know that you manifested it and you have something to show for it and you say, hey, like, do you think I can do this? And if someone tells you no, it almost makes you want to do it more because you're like, no, 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 I can make this work. You're not seeing this right, you know? And it's tough, but at the end of the day, business is business, and it's important to get outside perspectives on things and make things make sense on paper. And so I appreciate you, being open minded about that, and being receiving of my not so fortunate advice. But I hope it doesn't dissuade you from continuing to push and do exactly what you've been doing, because all this should be saying is that you're on the right track and you're making the right moves, and I don't think you should be changing your path at all.
Yeah, that's the plan. Just gotta keep trucking until you find something that feels like the best opportunity moving forward.
Yeah, and I think more will come along, and Mando, I'm more than excited to hear about those opportunities as they do. So I highly encourage you to reach out the next time you send out a mailer or something falls into your lap. So I'm really excited about it. And to close out the interview as we started it, I'm just going to play my ringtone, and you won't get it because you're not a Star Wars person. All right. So I hope everyone enjoyed that episode. Again, I feel so sorry for having tried to deceive the audience on this one. But I think that we've made our apologies known. So just to speak on the subject in the interview. So I think we covered a lot of it, when we were talking, Peyton, but or Mando, should I say. But you know, I when you first told me about this opportunity, when you found it, I was super stoked. Like I thought it was just going to be the move. I really thought so at first.
I thought it was going to be the move.
Yeah, right. I mean, how far did you go with the seller? Like, I mean, how how many to what base did you get with the seller? Like, were you having dinner with them? Were you like getting to know them
Yes.
pretty well and excited about it? Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's tough because I think we both kind of were really excited about this opportunity for you at first.
Yeah, it's like I would get another piece of information. I'd be like, ooh, and then it'd be another one. Be like, it's just like they're just chipping away. I was like, dang it, like
yeah. Yeah. And I think that, when you were talking to the seller, he was saying things here and there that sort of hinted at, how clinically efficient he was. And I think we both were just like, man, this is just a bridge too far.
mm-hmm.
And I think that if there were other mitigating factors like a higher new patient flow, that wouldn't necessitate you pouring money into marketing to try and drum that up, needing more cash flow, despite the fact that you're servicing a huge note. If there were a really clear pathway for how he was going to be clinically mentoring you, if he didn't do so many things off the bat, so many things that you'd have to learn and get up to speed with. If there were more hygienists, something else to kind of make it a sweeter deal, then maybe we could have made this really make sense. It's not that you couldn't do it. It's just that it wouldn't
makes sense.
Really do you any good. Like you can do better for yourself with a different type of opportunity, and you have plenty of time and flexibility. So gosh, it was tough to say no to this one.
Yeah. And
The seller was awesome.
Something too that I thought of just looking at the opportunity was this opportunity would have been a whole different ballgame if this stock was producing like 800 to $1 million. It'd be a whole different ballgame.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I feel like it would be almost a slam dunk.
I'd be very, very okay with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just hard to get over that super producer bump in the road.
Right. And that's really the primary thorn in your side here, because as you said, if he were more bread and butter, if we were looking at 800 to $1 million in production, this would be the sort of solo practice, into group practice play that it has really become pretty common among audience members that have bought practices. It's not terribly hard to find, and it's a fairly straightforward path to growing those types of practices into functional or profitable group practice avatars, right? But with this, you've got someone who sort of came into a fork in the road, right? They were that solo doc, and then they pushed past that 1.2 million mark into being a super solo by just adding more procedures and doing more work and earning more money with their own hands. And it's just really hard to flip that back into the solo practice it was with this big inflated note and then try to make it into a group practice by reinvesting in it. That's really, really hard. And there's a lot of lag time and the cash flow is not great.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of like you were saying, if you're productive solo, you can kind of choose, do I want to switch over to the profitable group, or do I want to go the direction of super solo?
Yeah.
And once you choose super solo, I feel like it's kind of hard to go back and then choose to do profitable group.
Exactly. You're digging yourself out of a hole. So yeah, I think that's one of the biggest takeaways is, for the new grad, for the young dentist, that super solo is just something you really got to look out for. I mean, there might be some things that make it work, but they weren't here this time. So Peyton, I really appreciate you entertaining our really, really bad idea. And I appreciate the audience doing so as well and being willing to play along. This one ran a little bit long, but I hope you guys got a lot out of it. So really appreciate it. And we'll be seeing you guys next week.